The house on Red Maple Lane used to sound like life. For 39 years, Naomi and Lovu had filled it with the small, faithful rituals that make a place feel loved. On winter mornings, she brewed chicory coffee before sunrise, because Elias liked the smell drifting down the hallway. On Sundays, she sang old church hymns under her breath while folding towels warm from the dryer. At Christmas, she tied ribbon around the staircase by hand because Elias always said a home should look touched by love, not decorated by a store. Now the house smelled like funeral lilies, tape, and cardboard. It had been 19 days since Elias and Lovu was buried, and grief had not yet settled into something she could carry. It still moved through her like a storm with no direction. At night, Naomi still woke expecting to hear his slippers brushing the hallway floor. Some mornings, she reached across the bed before remembering the terrible truth. He was gone. And by the end of that gray afternoon, Naomi would learn that losing her husband was only the first wound. Before we go further, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Rain tapped against the dining room windows as Naomi stood staring at a photograph from their anniversary trip to Charleston. Elias had been thinner in that picture than he admitted, but his smile was steady, and his hand rested over hers as though it had belonged there all his life. Behind her, the front door opened without a knock. Jabari and Lovu walked in first. Tall, sharp-faced, wearing a tailored black coat that still looked too new for mourning, he entered the house like he had already measured it for resale. Behind him came his wife, Celine, her arms full of folders, her expression arranged into something that wanted to look compassionate but never reached her eyes. A third man followed them, carrying a leather briefcase and the kind of silence that made Naomi's stomach turn before he even spoke. "Mrs. Ndlovu," he said. "I'm Bernard Cole." Naomi looked at Jabari. "Why is there a lawyer in my house?" Jabari exhaled impatiently. "We need to talk about the estate." Not Elias, not loss, not family. The estate. Naomi felt something cold move through her chest. Elias's son had never truly accepted her. Though she had raised him from the time he was 14, packed his lunches, sat through his football games, mailed him money in college when he never asked Elias for it directly, Jabari had always looked at her with a distance that never softened. She used to tell herself that time would make love easier. Time had done no such thing. Bernard opened his briefcase and placed several papers on the table. "There are outstanding debts connected to your late husband's holdings," he said smoothly. "And there are questions about your ability to manage the remaining assets independently." Naomi blinked once. "My ability?" Celine stepped forward quickly. "Naomi, please don't make this harder than it already is. We're worried about you." "Worried?" Naomi repeated. "You brought an attorney into my home 3 weeks after I buried my husband, and you want me to call that worry?" Jabari rubbed his jaw. "Dad left a mess." "No," Naomi said quietly. "Your father left recipes tucked into drawers for me to find when I felt lonely. He left notes in books because he knew I reread pages when I missed him. He left a man's life behind. He did not leave a mess." For a moment, nobody answered. Then Naomi noticed the boxes. They were stacked near the staircase, labeled, taped shut. Her mouth went dry. "My things?" Celine looked away first. That told Naomi everything she needed to know. "We packed what you'd need immediately," Celine said. Naomi turned slowly. "You went into my bedroom?" "It's temporary," Jabari snapped. "You can stay somewhere comfortable until this is sorted out." "Somewhere comfortable?" Naomi whispered. "Where?" Jabari's silence was its own answer. Naomi stared at him, and in that long, terrible moment she understood what had already happened. They had planned this. Maybe before Elias died, maybe while he was dying, while Naomi was sleeping in a chair by his hospital bed, while she was learning to crush ice chips against his lips, while she was praying for one more week, one more sunrise, one more breath. They had been preparing to remove her. "You think I'm in your way," she said. Jabari said nothing. Bernard slid another document toward her. "This property is now under review. If you cooperate, the transition will go more smoothly." Naomi laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Transition? Is that what you call throwing a widow out of her own front door?" Jabari's face hardened. "It's not your house." The sentence hit her so hard she had to grip the back of a chair. For 39 years she had polished those floors, painted those walls, buried a dog in the backyard, nursed Elias through pneumonia, cancer scares, surgeries, and the final long unraveling that took him inch by inch. Yet now she was being spoken to like a guest who had stayed too long. Naomi went upstairs without asking permission. No one stopped her. Inside the bedroom, the air still held Elias's cedar soap and the medicinal scent of his final months. His glasses sat on the nightstand, beside a book he had not finished. Naomi opened the closet and reached for his old brown coat, the one he wore on road trips and cold mornings in the yard. She pressed it to her face and almost broke. Downstairs, she could hear Jabari discussing property timelines with Bernard, like she was already gone. When Naomi came down with her suitcase, Celine opened the front door. Wind pushed rain into the hallway. Jabari did not meet Naomi's eyes. No one offered to carry the bag. No one asked where she would sleep. The door closed behind her with a hard final sound, and a moment later she heard the deadbolt turn. Naomi stood on the porch in the rain, holding Elias's coat to her chest. For the first time since his funeral, panic came fully alive. She sat slowly on the porch bench, rain soaking her shoes, and bent over as though grief itself had weight. Then, beneath her fingers, she felt something hidden in the coat lining, something hard, something small. Her breath caught. Naomi reached into a torn seam and pulled out an old brass key wrapped in wax paper around a folded note. She knew the handwriting before she opened it. "Naomi, if they force you out, go back to Red Clay Road. Open the cellar behind the south shed. Trust no one who suddenly speaks for me. I am sorry I stayed silent so long. Elias." Naomi read the note again, then again. Red Clay Road. She had only been there twice in all their marriage. An abandoned family farm outside a half-forgotten Tennessee town Elias never liked to speak about. When she asked about his childhood, he usually said only this: "Some land keeps records people don't know how to read." At the time, Naomi thought he meant memory. Now she wondered if he meant evidence. 3 hours later, she was sitting in a nearly empty bus station with a paper cup of bad coffee and one suitcase by her feet. Jabari had frozen the joint accounts. Naomi counted what little cash she had left twice. $211. That was what nearly 4 decades had come down to in a single night. When the ticket clerk asked her destination, Naomi hesitated only a second. "Red Clay," she said. The bus ride took most of the night. Rain gave way to fog, then highways, then long strips of dark countryside where lonely lights blinked in distant homes. Naomi did not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elias at the kitchen table, quiet and worried in those last months, looking as though he carried something heavier than illness. Near dawn, she remembered something he had whispered 1 week before he died. "If the day comes when nobody believes you belong, promise me you will keep walking until the truth catches up." She had kissed his forehead then and told him not to talk like that. Now, those words rode beside her through the dark. By late afternoon, the bus dropped Naomi near an aging gas station with peeling paint and a crooked sign. Red Clay was not really a town anymore. It was a road, a few scattered houses, and a silence that seemed older than the pavement. She dragged her suitcase down a dirt path until the wheels stopped helping and became a burden. The farm appeared at last through a line of trees. It looked like a memory left outside too long. The farmhouse leaned slightly to one side. The barn had partially collapsed. The pasture grass had grown wild, swallowing fence posts and rusted tools. Behind the house, beyond a slope of red earth and weeds, stood the south shed Elias had mentioned in his note. Naomi left her suitcase on the porch and walked toward it. Every step felt like walking deeper into a part of her husband he had never fully given words to. The shed was half caved in, its roof broken, boards soft with age. But the ground behind it looked wrong. Too level, too shaped. Beneath vines and mud, Naomi found the outline of a metal hatch. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She fell to her knees and scraped away dirt with both hands until the handle was clear. The hatch was heavy, stubborn, almost fused shut with time. Naomi found a broken iron post nearby and wedged it beneath the latch. Once, nothing. Twice, a groan from the metal. On the third push, the seal gave way. Cold air rose from below, carrying the smell of earth, cedar, and years of silence. A ladder disappeared into darkness. Naomi turned on the flashlight from her phone and climbed down. The underground room was far larger than she expected. It wasn't a crude hiding place. It was a carefully built cellar, reinforced with concrete, lined with shelves, storage trunks, file boxes, and a broad wooden table at the center. Dust lay over everything, but beneath it was order, intention. On the far wall, written in faded chalk, were words that made her knees weaken. For Naomi, if I am too late. She covered her mouth and stared. Elias had prepared this for her. Hands shaking, Naomi opened the nearest file box. Inside were documents in sealed sleeves. Bank statements, property deeds, corporate filings, letters, photographs, handwritten notes in Elias's careful script. She turned pages faster and faster, not understanding at first, then understanding too much. Jabari's name appeared again and again. Unauthorized loans, land transfers, trust amendments. Companies Naomi had never heard of. Wire routes, insurance changes, signatures that looked legal until they were placed beside Elias's annotations in red ink. Not approved, forged, delayed, hidden. Naomi stepped back, dizzy. This was not family tension. This was theft dressed in manners. On the table sat a locked wooden case. Carved into the lid were 6 words: "Open when the lies corner you." Naomi used the brass key. Inside was a small voice recorder, a leather notebook, and a letter. She opened the letter first. Naomi, I wanted to tell you everything, but I kept believing I could fix it before it reached you. I was wrong. Jabari has been moving money through names you do not know and papers he hoped I would be too sick to follow. I did follow them. I left proof in this cellar, and with one man I still trust. If you are reading this, then he will come when the time is right. Do not surrender the notebook. Do not sign anything, and do not let them turn your grief into your silence. Elias. Naomi was still reading when she heard footsteps above. She froze. Voices drifted down through the open hatch. Jabari and Celine. I told you she came here, Jabari said. She found something. Celine's voice trembled. Maybe we should just call her and... No, if she's got the notebook, we take it before anyone else sees it. Naomi's chest tightened so sharply she had to lean against the wall. They had followed her. She grabbed the recorder and pressed play. Static crackled. Then Elias's voice filled the cellar, tired, low, unmistakably real. Naomi, if you are hearing this, then I am gone, and the storm I feared has already broken. Her whole body shook. I should have protected you sooner. Jabari is not merely reckless, he is deliberate. What began as hidden debt became fraud. What became fraud turned into pressure, and pressure turned into planning. He expected my illness to do the rest. Above, footsteps crossed directly over the hatch. Naomi clutched the recorder tighter. There is one person who knows where the legal copies are held. His name is Kojo Mensah. He was my friend before he ever became my attorney. If the cellar is opened, he will know why. A truck engine sounded in the distance. Then another voice called out from above, strong and unfamiliar. "Jabari, step away from that hatch." Naomi looked up. Silence. Then Jabari cursed under his breath. When Naomi climbed out minutes later, the sky had darkened with storm clouds. A tall man in his 60s stood near the field holding a briefcase and a sealed folder. His face was serious but kind. "Mrs. Ndlovu," he said, "I'm Kojo Mensah. Elias asked me to wait until the evidence surfaced." Jabari turned sharply. "This is private property." Kojo didn't even look at him. "Not anymore." He handed Naomi the folder. Inside were notarized trust documents, protective filings, and a clause so precise it made her breath stop. If Naomi was unlawfully removed from her residence or denied access to marital funds, all remaining estate assets would lock under independent review and primary authority would transfer to protected fiduciary control. Elias had known. He had not stopped death, but he had prepared for betrayal. Jabari's confidence cracked for the first time. "This means nothing." Kojo answered calmly. "It means you moved too early." Naomi opened Elias's notebook while standing there in the field. Page after page connected the full pattern. Money siphoned through shell accounts, forged signatures, pressure on legal counsel, fraudulent debt structures designed to make Naomi appear financially dependent and mentally confused. Celine stepped back slowly, staring at Jabari. "How much of this is true?" Jabari didn't answer her. That answer was enough. If you like this story, subscribe my channel for more beautiful stories. By morning, Kojo had secured the cellar, copied the evidence, and filed emergency motions. Naomi spent the night in the old farmhouse, under a blanket that smelled of dust and old wood, listening to wind move through cracks in the walls. She did not sleep much, but she was no longer drifting. Grief had not lessened. It had sharpened into purpose. The hearing took place 3 days later in a small Tennessee courthouse. Naomi wore a simple navy dress and Elias's old coat draped over her shoulders until the last moment. Kojo stood beside her with the notebook, the recordings, and the trust documents organized in a row so cleanly it felt like the truth itself had learned discipline. Jabari came with 2 attorneys. He no longer looked arrogant. He looked careful. That was more dangerous. Inside the courtroom, Kojo laid out the timeline. The hidden loans, the unauthorized transfers, the account restrictions, the rushed eviction, the forged amendments. Then he played Elias's recording. The room went still. "I did not create this protection because I doubted my wife," Elias's voice said. "I created it because I finally understood who around me mistook kindness for weakness." Naomi lowered her eyes for a moment, not to hide tears, to steady them. Jabari's lawyer argued that Elias had been ill, vulnerable, emotionally manipulated. He suggested Naomi had influenced him during his final months, suggested grief had distorted her memory, suggested the cellar evidence could have been staged. Then Kojo introduced Elias's independent filings, time-stamped copies stored in 3 jurisdictions, and the sworn statements of 2 financial officers who confirmed irregular transfers. The defense began to unravel. When Jabari finally took the stand, he tried to sound reasonable. He spoke about pressure, misunderstanding, complicated business arrangements. He called the transfers temporary solutions. He called the forged signatures expedited corrections. He called Naomi confused. That was when Naomi asked to speak. The courtroom allowed it. She stood slowly, hands trembling, but voice steady. "For 39 years," she said, "I loved a man through youth, illness, fear, and death. I do not know every legal word in this room. I do not know how men like Jabari learn to hide greed inside paperwork. But I know my husband. I know his voice. I know the difference between a mistake and a pattern. And I know what it feels like when people wait for a woman to become small enough to erase." No one moved. Naomi looked directly at Jabari. "You were not content to steal money. You wanted to take memory, home, and dignity with it. That is why you locked the door behind me." Jabari looked away. That, too, was an answer. The judge reviewed the trust, the evidence logs, and the recordings in long silence. Every second felt suspended over a drop. Then he ruled. The protective trust would stand. Naomi's displacement from her home had been unlawful. All primary estate actions taken after Elias's death would be frozen pending investigation. Civil fraud findings would move forward. Criminal review was recommended immediately. The gavel came down once. Naomi did not smile. Victory was too small a word for what she felt. It was not joy. It was not revenge. It was the strange, holy quiet that comes when a lie finally runs out of room. Outside the courthouse, the clouds were breaking. Kojo asked if she wanted to return to Red Maple Lane once the order was enforced. Naomi stood on the steps for a long moment before answering. "No," she said softly. "Not yet." He waited. Naomi looked toward the open sky. "That house held my life, but the farm held his truth. I think I need to begin where he finished." A week later, Naomi returned to Red Clay Road. The old farmhouse was still weather-worn, the paint still peeled, the field still bent under wild grass. But the cellar was sealed, catalogued, and no longer buried in silence. Kojo arranged for repairs to begin on the farmhouse, though Naomi asked him to leave one wall untouched, the one where Elias had written her name. She stood there often in the late afternoon, listening to the sounds of hammers outside, one hand resting against the chalk words he had left behind. "For Naomi, if I am too late." He had been too late to stop the betrayal, but not too late to leave her a path through it. Months passed. Investigators uncovered more than Naomi expected. Additional accounts, false debt structures, and years of concealed transfers. Celine eventually testified, not because she was brave at first, but because truth kept arriving faster than fear could bury it. Jabari lost more than the case. He lost the story he had built around himself. And Naomi? Naomi planted a garden beside the south shed. Tomatoes, basil, marigolds, a row of white roses for Elias. Some evenings, she sat on the repaired porch with a cup of coffee and read from Elias's old books. Some nights, she still cried when the house grew too quiet. Grief did not vanish just because justice arrived. It simply stopped being lonely. One Sunday, after church, a neighbor from down the road asked Naomi whether she ever wished none of it had happened. Naomi thought for a long moment. Then she said, "I wish Elias had trusted me with the burden sooner. I wish love had not been tested by greed. I wish some doors never had to close. But I do not wish I had stayed blind." The neighbor nodded, understanding more than words could hold. That evening, Naomi opened the cellar once more, not because she needed evidence now, but because she wanted to stand in the place where fear had turned into courage. She ran her hand along the shelves, the table, the boxes, the reinforced walls. A room built for storms had become the place where her life began again. Before climbing back up, she whispered into the cool silence, "I kept walking, Elias." And in the stillness that followed, she felt, for the first time in many months, not abandoned, but accompanied. She came out into the fading light, closed the hatch gently, and looked across the field glowing red beneath the sunset. The wind moved softly through the grass, no longer like warning, but like blessing. Naomi had lost a husband. She had lost a home. She had lost the illusion that love alone protects what is precious. But she had found something many people never find even in a lifetime. She had found the truth before it was too late to save herself. And sometimes, that is what dignity looks like. Not never falling, not never grieving, not never being betrayed, but standing back up with the evidence of your own worth in your hands and refusing, absolutely refusing, to disappear. If you like this story, subscribe my channel for more beautiful stories.